before we go, a couple of people sent this, and we talked about this the other day in the context of Joe Rogan. That Joe Rogan had mentioned us on the show because of a video that we had done about him and Doug Stanhope and this and that. And people were emailing me. They were upset. They were like, Joe Rogan is inviting Kyle Kulinski and Jimmy Dore on the show. And he should invite you. And I was like, look, I'm happy for anybody from the left to get on that show to promote left issues. The problem is that, and do we have those screenshots? We should have two. We need that other one, Brendan. He doesn't have it.
Which one?
The one from the Reddit.
That's in the sample.
Okay, so I don't see it here, but part of the problem is, and make sure you get it, Matt. One of the problems with this is that, like I've been saying, look, I don't care about Jimmy as a person. I don't care about, it would be nice if he was actually did any work. But the problem is that I've suggested is that when you have somebody going around doing stuff like Hillary Clinton has Parkinson's, or, the Seth Rich murder, is it tied to the DNC? Asking those type of questions, right? Okay. That stuff poisons the well. It poisons the well and the water supply and the product that I'm selling, which may very well be the exact same political program, more or less, than Jimmy's. For Jimmy, he's willing to trade things like what's happening with ICE to these people for a vague notion of the words Green New Deal, which had, of course, no chance of coming about. But as long as, but that self-satisfaction and whatnot, that's all well and good. But here's where the real problem lies. Here is Jimmy Dore on the Joe Rogan show.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
That's why I get. So excuse me. The Joe Rogan Experience.
Barack Obama's entire cabinet came from an email from Citigroup. Okay, so people trying to say that somehow corruption started on January 20th, 2017, are fooling themselves, and that's what I'm fighting against.
Yes,
on my show.
You are, and you're one of the only people that are doing that. You're one of the only people that are online that you're not obligated to shill for the left. You're not doing it, but everybody else seems to be. I don't mean everybody else.
Pause it. Now, here's the interesting thing is that, and I don't know why Jimmy didn't make this distinction more pointedly. I don't think Jimmy would say that that there are people who are obligated to shill for the left, as much as there are people that in their context would be obligated to shill for the Democrats. But for Rogan, these are interchangeable ideas. But go ahead.
Doing it, but everybody else seems to be. I don't mean everybody else. If you're one of the people that are not, like, fuck you, Joe Rogan.
There's just a handful of people who are not. Joe.
There's so few. There's so few that are calling out people in the Democratic Party for what really is going on. Like, I was infuriated when people that I knew that I was friends with were trying to tell me that Hillary Clinton was a good choice. And that's the same choice.
Pause it. Now, of course, he's talking about in the race with Donald Trump, and I would still contend, and I think there's even mounting evidence now, that Hillary Clinton was the better choice between those two.
And not a good choice in general, like in the grand scheme of things. There's no contradiction between those two things.
None whatsoever. We have a system where there was, if anybody, I would have taken any dollar amount ever from anybody that who wanted to bet that either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton would not win.
Yep.
I would have bet every single thing I own and things I don't own. And nobody would take a bet otherwise who was sane. But roll it back and let's just hear. So So now I don't expect Jimmy Dore to take a different position, because his position throughout the thing was that, lesser of evilism is, I don't know what, but more or less, I'm sure they're going to agree here. But go ahead.
That Hillary Clinton was a good choice. And that's the same choice. I'm like, look, I don't know if she's murdered people, but I know that I worry that she's murdered people. That's a real. I really wonder. Like this Seth Rich shit.
I know. First of all, just leave. You don't even need to go there. You know.
Pause it for 1 second. That's interesting. You don't even have to go there. Trying to think of somebody who went there. Can we just pull up that image for a second? What's that one? Who is this here? Did DNC staffer Seth Rich murdered tied to WikiLeaks? Guess who went there? That's odd. There's Jimmy Dore sitting there next to a picture of Seth Rich. There you go. Oh, but he got 116,000 views out of that one. That's good. All right, let's go back to the interview with Joe Rogan here, because Jimmy Dore, of course, doesn't respond to the Seth Rich thing. Instead of saying, hey, actually, no, the issue with Hillary Clinton had to do with her politics, not the fact that you think she might have killed somebody because you've been listening to Rush Limbaugh for 30 years telling you that Vince Foster was secretly murdered. Like, there's no room for sanity in this conversation now.
Or what have you
because Jimmy has already forfeited that.
Right.
And that's the problem. The value of Jimmy going on to this show is already undercut because he can't respond to the idea that Joe Rogan doesn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton because he thinks she may have murdered somebody. But continue. And I would add that Seth Rich was killed after the election. So I don't know who he thought that she had killed before then. I guess he must be Vince Foster. And this would be a great time to say, this is one of the problems in our politics, Joe. And that is that, like, because Rush Limbaugh was on there and there was an entire conspiracy thing arguing that Vince Foster had been murdered and dragged his body to the park.
What if you enlarged it? And what if you said, every single president of the United States is at the very least complicit in murder just via the design of our foreign policy, Joe?
Yeah, there's a million ways to do that. But Jimmy can't do that because when Joe Rogan brings up Seth Rich, look, it takes a while for Jimmy to figure out how to answer this because Jimmy went in on this. Now, maybe Joe Rogan could say, like, I couldn't vote for somebody in good conscience who was so clearly had Parkinson's. And Joe would have the same problem. Jimmy would have the same problem because he did multiple videos on that. But go ahead.
And that's the same choice. I'm like, look, I don't know if she's murdered people, but I know that I worry that she's murdered people. That's a real. I really wonder. Like this Seth Rich shit.
I know. First of all, just leave. You don't even need to go there. You know,
there's so many other things.
There's so many other things that we know for a fact.
The Clinton Foundation, for instance.
So, the Iraq War.
What do we know about the Clinton Foundation? For sure, Bill Clinton right now. Look, I don't know anything for sure about the Clinton Foundation. I know that Bill Clinton, in a pretty crafty move, spent the past couple of days in the Virgin Islands in Puerto Rico delivering all sorts of medical shit, which is clearly a way to set up Chelsea Clinton's run in 30 years. Could be. We get 30 years of charity work so that she can have a run. But it's all just to cover up the Vince Foster thing.
The Clinton thing was another thing that muddied the waters, though. I just say, of course, they took tons of money from people that wanted to have a good relationship with them, including foreign governments and corporations, because that's who they are. And that's a big problem in and of itself. But this flipped conspiratorial thing is
right.
different.
But, compare that to Donald Trump,
who
he's also undoubtedly took money from people. That's...
No.
Those
I run
are the
a clean
people
ship.
who run for president.
I run a clean ship.
Those are the people who run for president. Right. And then here's the thing. Jimmy goes on to make a lot of different points that I more or less agree with.
Yeah, he's on the ball with the Iraq stuff, I think.
Sure. Although, John Kerry also voted for the Iraq War, and it would have been better to have him than George W. Bush.
No kidding.
And Donald Trump was supportive. Now, he wasn't a senator, but Barack Obama was also against the Iraq War. I mean, he goes on to talk about how Donald Trump, people got really hoodwinked by Donald Trump because they thought he was going to be non-interventionist. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that the guy who started Trump University was able to hoodwink people?
I think there were also some people in the media zone who did correctly anticipate that Donald Trump's anti-intervention thing wasn't exactly something to bank.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's
I
possible.
also thought
a couple
that,
of clairvoyants out there might have
they
been able to see through that veneer.
Sam and I were real
criminologists.
We were real Miss Cleo on that shit
Right.
because we also thought when he directly called for war crimes in his campaign rallies that might have been also a tell.
Right, yeah. The pro-torture, the overt pro-torture calls may have been an indication.
The pig's blood
he wasn't-
thing.
Yeah.
Pig's
yeah,
blood thing.
Maybe.
Bomb the shit out of them, steal their oil.
Could have gone either way.
A little bit of a heads
Go
up.
after their families.
But here's the real problem is that because Jimmy could not push back on stuff like Seth Rich and whatnot, the value of his going on that show is diminished. Exhibit A, here is the Donald Trump Reddit board. For real, this Joe Rogan video, everyone's talking about exposing the DNC's obvious involvement in the murder of Seth Rich, is 100% worth the watch and should be spread far and wide. And
obvious.
you know why it's so obvious? Is because the so-called leftist there, who Joe is bringing on to show his bona fides in taking other people's opinions, does not even slightly push back on that because he can't.
That's some Alex Jones shit.
It is indeed. It is indeed. But that's an example of the point that I was always trying to make with Jimmy. And fortunately, Jimmy and Joe did it for me, and I just didn't want to let that
Damn.
pass.
I'm starting to get mad now, too. I'll admit, I initially found your feud with him somewhat boring.
Well,
but
by the
then
time you got here, it was really Michael's feud with him.
Yeah, it's Michael's going to be
adopted
over it
it.
in like 3 months, and then it's going to be Jamie
Yeah.
on it.
Right.
Like,
And then it will
I'm starting
revert
to
back
get mad.
Sam. Actually, and you, low-key, have been a constant instigator.
I just keep it on a simmer.
Yeah, Lek has a simmer on it. No,
I mean, I've been off it for months
I
and
mean,
months.
look,
But it's like I abandoned the
I think
child,
it's
and
a
then
shame.
Michael couldn't help it, but
Well,
went out
I
and
was-
bought
well,
it, like
no,
a
'cause I
brand new
was-
coat and
I was waiting.
scarf and earmuffs, and said, "Come have some hot cocoa."
Come have some. No, I was hoping after the election that he would redeem himself and do the same. Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I initially...
No, actually, you did think so briefly. You thought that several months into the
Not
Trump
him.
Yeah, not him personally. You never
No.
thought for a second. Yeah, because he found his niche, and it's a shame because he speaks very effectively to anger and a general disgust, and that you can't take away from him, and it's a fucking shame.
Well,
that,
I initially thought when you were talking about him and Jill Stein that he was sort of like this very principled leftist anarchist type who goes to Food Not Bombs and really has a systemic critique of neoliberalism.
fuck Food Not Bombs. I didn't hear one fucking
Liberals and
Food Not
Republicans,
Bombs
but,
do
like-
a fucking YouTube video.
But you're a bad leftist if you care that much about national electoral politics over literally anything else that he could be talking about. So that kind of put the lie to it for me.
I mean,
All right.
what put it to me, the last thing I'll say is when, is this Kamala Harris video where it was like, look, I think Kamala Harris is totally a wolf in sheep's clothing. I'm not a fan of hers, but if your interpretation is the tectonic plates have moved so much that this corporatist is saying that for a single payer, and instead of saying you got to watch her and demand specifics, yeah, that's a smart video. Not do you see the tonality of the register of her voice? She's not enthusiastic. I mean, come on, man, get the fuck out of
This
here.
is relevant to the
No.
Gillibrand
Yeah.
clip we'll play later.
Right.
Yeah, I call bullshit, Jimmy Dore.
Oh, now you've done it. Now.
Because you know what? I voted for Jill Stein too. I'm not proud of it, There were no good choices. I voted in New York. I would have voted for Hillary in a swing state, even though I hate everything she stands for.
Because you vote out of fear.
And just,
you go, oh,
yeah,
go
fine.
back, be
yeah.
afraid.
Trump is terrible. The Republicans are terrible. You should be afraid of that. Sorry. And I go to every DSA meeting. I think that it's much more important, as I've said, to work on the underlying social forces and building class power. But also, it helps not to have the worst of two evils running the show.
Clinton shill.
Clinton
All
shill.
right.
If that makes me a Clinton shill, then
Coward,
very
neoliberal.
Just
strange
tell it to Joy
world we're
Reid.
living in.
Just tell it that.
So just run more interference for
there you
Neera
go.
Tanden, and
There
people
you
wonder
go.
why they don't fucking trust you.
like it doesn't seem like something we should be spending
we should
that much
doctor,
time
we
on.
should doctor a picture of Jamie and Neera Tanden just hanging out, drinking beer.
Do it.